5 shadow states that separate real dark chosen ones from the false light. You don't find truth where it's comfortable. You find it where it burns. And if you've made it here, it means something in you is already awakening to a deeper layer of this spiritual game, one most people will never even see. We live in an age where everyone wants to be light, where people perform spirituality in perfect aesthetics, where they memorize mantras but avoid mirrors. But the real transformation? It doesn't happen in the light. It happens when you're staring into the abyss, and the abyss starts whispering your name. That's where the real dark chosen ones are born, not in temples, not in retreats, but in the 5 shadow states that no false light being can survive. Let's not romanticize this. These shadow states are brutal. They don't teach you, they strip you. They don't elevate you, they bury you alive until you either become something immortal or disappear entirely. And that's the point. These states aren't punishments. They're initiations. And only those who are truly encoded with the dark divine blueprint can walk through them and retain their core. Everyone else? They break. They run. They cling to illusions of love and light that never had the voltage to dissolve their karma to begin with. The first shadow state is existential dissolution. This is not sadness. It's not depression. It's the terrifying realization that nothing is real. That your identity, your beliefs, your spiritual self were all constructs layered onto you by culture, trauma, karma. It's when the divine rips off your spiritual costume and leaves you naked in the void. This isn't poetic, it's annihilating. And only those who truly carry the dark code can survive this without clinging to false narratives. We don't run from the void, we merge with it. We let it eat us. And we come out on the other side with no face, no name, only truth. You feel like you're dying, and in a way you are. This is the death of control, of safety, of identity. And most people can't handle that. They run back to the illusion. They rejoin the spiritual herd. They find a guru to follow or a new light language to distract them from the gnawing silence inside. But we stay. We let the silence speak. We let the false self rot. And that's how we know we're different. Not because we're more powerful, but because we're more surrendered. And that surrender becomes the seed of something that no book, no teacher, no ritual could ever give you. The second shadow state is sacred rage embodiment. This is where the false light completely collapses, because the false light path teaches suppression. Be calm, be kind, be love. But the real dark chosen ones? We're not here to be palatable. We're here to embody the wrath of the divine when justice is being denied. And that means we've had to face our rage not as a flaw, but as a sacred current. We've screamed at the sky. We've felt fire tearing through our bodies. We've trembled under the weight of ancestral pain we didn't even know we were carrying. And instead of hiding it, we owned it. Rage is not the enemy. Misused rage is. Repressed rage is. But sacred rage? It's a weapon. It's a purifier. The real ones know this. The false ones try to bypass it, to mask their fear of confrontation with fake compassion. But compassion without boundaries is just codependency. And love without justice is just manipulation. This is where we separate. This is where we rise. not as saints, but as storm bringers for the collective soul. And if that makes others uncomfortable, so be it. We didn't come here to be liked. We came here to recalibrate the grid. And sometimes that means burning it down. The third shadow state is self-exile from spiritual systems. This one is subtle but savage. It hits you when you realize that even the spiritual world is a matrix. Even the communities, the teachings, the influencers, they're just new skins for the same old ego. And suddenly you feel more alone than ever. You don't belong to the old world, but you also don't belong to the awakened world. You're floating in a liminal space of void between timelines, and that's where the real work begins. That's when the divine whispers, "Now you're ready to walk alone." This exile is not punishment, it's repositioning. You're being pulled out of spiritual echo chambers to become a frequency that no system can tame. You're not meant to fit in, you're meant to transmit. And that means walking without maps, without mentors, without applause. You become your own oracle. You learn to trust the silence more than teachings. You learn to decode reality through experience, not dogma. And you start to realize you don't need a path. You are the path. And that realization doesn't come with comfort, it comes with a cold clarity that cuts through illusion like a blade. The fourth shadow state is energetic crucifixion. This one is hard to speak about because it's invisible. You're doing nothing wrong. You're not in crisis. But you feel like something is tearing through your field, night after night, day after day. Everything you thought you healed resurfaces. Old contracts collapse. People disappear. You feel watched, hunted, and yet inside something is awakening. This is the moment where the false light would call it an attack. But the real ones know it's not just an attack. It's a test of frequency sovereignty. You're being dismantled not because you're weak, but because you're being upgraded. You're being stripped of anything that can't hold your next level of power. And the more you resist, the more painful it becomes. But when you surrender, when you let the invisible forces refine you, your field begins to transmit at a level that collapses illusions just by existing. This is where you stop being a seeker. You become a source. You don't follow the light. You become the axis of paradox, both destroyer and healer, both storm and sanctuary. That's the mark of the real ones. And the fifth shadow state, we'll go deep into that in the next part. It's the most terrifying one, and the most sacred. It's the one that no false light being can fake, and no true dark chosen one can avoid. In it, everything you thought was yours, your gifts, your power, your purpose is taken. And what's left? Just you, raw, empty, and God. The fifth shadow state, the godless abyss that only the real ones survive. The fifth shadow state is the one that breaks almost everyone. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with visions or voices or even pain. It comes with silence. Deafening, endless, crushing silence. It is the godless abyss, the place where even your connection to the divine seems to vanish. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've reached the point in your soul's training where even God steps back to see what you'll do when there's no light to guide you and no shadow to fight. Nothing, just you and the void. This is not depression. This is not lethargy. This is spiritual anesthesia. Your gifts shut down. Your intuition dulls. Your dreams stop speaking. Your guides go quiet. And you're left wondering if it was all a lie. If the miracles, the awakenings, the signs were just projections of a desperate mind. That's how deep this abyss goes. It's not here to scare you. It's here to strip you of dependency. Because even your connection to God, when based on emotion or sensation, can become a crutch. And the real ones. We don't walk by emotion. We walk by alignment, even when the heavens go silent. This is where the false light fails. Because false light spirituality is built on constant feedback loops, angel numbers, synchronicities, feel-good teachings, community validation. But when all of that disappears, the false light path collapses. It was never built on truth, it was built on comfort. And the abyss is allergic to comfort. It doesn't coddle you. It crucifies you. And only those who are truly chosen will walk forward anyway, without a sign, without a signal, without a safety net. That's what separates the real from the rest. Not how much light you carry, but how much silence you can survive. If you're in this phase, or if you've been through it, you already know. The world feels gray. Your rituals feel empty. Nothing excites you. And yet, deep within the numbness, something sacred is happening. Your soul is being rewired. Your nervous system is being upgraded to hold a level of divine intelligence that no human language can describe. But first, you must be emptied, not partially, completely. Because the version of you that came into the abyss cannot leave it. Only the next expression of you will walk out, and that version won't need signs. It will be the sign. You start to realize, in this space, that your connection to God was never external. It was you. You were the temple. You were the portal. You were the voice. And in that realization, the silence cracks open. Not with words, but with knowing. A knowing that pierces through every doubt, every fear, every illusion. You don't need evidence anymore. You don't need miracles to believe. You just know. And that knowing radiates a frequency that changes everything around you. You become unshakable. Not because you're better, but because you've died and come back as truth in motion. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing God to speak is the moment God begins to speak through you. Not in voices or visions, but in resonance. People feel something when you enter the room. They can't explain it, but they remember something ancient, something buried, something divine. That's the mark of someone who's walked through the godless abyss and returned. You don't preach. You don't convert. You remind. You are a living frequency of remembrance, and your very presence disrupts the matrix. But let me be clear, this is a lonely path. You will lose people. You will outgrow systems. You will be misunderstood. Because the world doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't need validation, who doesn't need community, who doesn't need to be saved. You become dangerous to the constructs that rely on fear and dependency. And that's exactly why you were chosen. Not to fit in, but to recalibrate what it means to be awake. Not to be light, but to be illumination itself, born from the dark. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really feel this. If you never heard God speak again, if there were no more signs, no more visions, no more miracles, Would you still walk the path? Would you still live in alignment even if no one was watching and no one ever thanked you? That's the question that only the real ones can answer. That's the doorway into true mastery. Because when you say yes to that, when you walk without needing to be seen, you become the rarest kind of being. The one who doesn't need to shine, because you've become the source of fire itself. And from that place, everything changes. Your presence becomes a weapon. Your silence becomes strategy. Your stillness becomes revolution. You don't fight. You resonate. And those who are meant to rise around you will. Not because you saved them, but because you stood as a living transmission of divine remembrance. And this is where the final layer begins. In the last part, we go into the rarest magic of all, how to walk in the world as a fully integrated shadow being, how to hold your paradox without collapsing into ego, how to activate others through your field without ever saying a word, and how to build a reality coded in raw, sovereign, unshakable truth. This is where the game ends for the false light and begins for the true architects of the new earth. How to build a sovereign life as a living God code embodied in human form. So you've walked through the void. You've entered the godless abyss. You've watched your identity disintegrate, your rage become sacred, your guides go silent, and your power become unbearable. And now, something strange is happening. You're still standing. Not just standing, you're becoming something else. Something cleaner, sharper, quieter. This is where the false light ends. This is where the performance dies. And this is where you begin to wear the invisible shadow crown, not a symbol of dominance, but of sovereign neutrality. You are no longer reactive. You are no longer waiting. You've become a living code. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you no longer make decisions based on fear or craving. You stop chasing the right path and begin building the path that matches your frequency, moment by moment. You don't need your mission to be loud. You don't need your gifts to be seen. You are not here to convert or convince. You are here to emit. You are here to anchor. You are here to recalibrate the grid by the way you walk, breathe, choose. And that means every part of your life, your home, your relationships, your rituals, your silence becomes ceremony. This is where the real work begins. It's easy to be powerful in the void, but can you hold that power in the marketplace, in your family, in relationships that trigger your oldest wounds? Because here's the truth the false light can't grasp. You don't rise by avoiding the world, you rise by recalibrating your place inside it. You don't get to ascend by bypassing matter. You must learn to become a God code inside human form. That means doing your taxes and speaking in tongues. That means holding boundaries and holding frequency. That means being deeply grounded and deeply mystical at once. We build sovereign lives not through control, but through energetic precision. You begin to curate your world down to the frequency. You choose your environments, your words, your food, your digital inputs with the same care a priest would handle a sacred relic. Why? Because your field is a living altar, and anything that touches it either feeds your code or scrambles it. This is not control. This is clarity. This is the natural byproduct of someone who has walked through all 5 shadow states and emerged with no tolerance for distortion. And now, the final secret. The real mark of a true dark chosen one is not in how much power you hold, it's in how little you need to use it. You become so aligned, so clean, so coherent, that your field does the work before your mouth opens. You no longer cast spells, you are the spell. You no longer seek portals, you are the portal. You no longer worship from a distance. You become the living shrine. People will come to you and not know why they're crying, why their trauma is surfacing, why they suddenly feel raw, exposed, activated. It's not you doing anything. It's just the mirror of your coherence reflecting everything they've refused to face. But here's the paradox. Even though you carry this type of power, you're not attached to it. That's the true shadow crown. You don't need to prove you're chosen. You don't need to broadcast your suffering. You don't need to explain why you left the temple, the tradition, the system. You simply live in your own law. You become the law of your own being, and that law is written in light and dark, in birth and death, in silence and fire. Let me ask you something now, and sit with it not mentally, but in your bones. If no one ever validated your path, if your sacred work never went viral, if your mission was to change the grid quietly, invisibly, from the background, would you still do it? Would you still walk with the same integrity, the same fire, the same devotion? Because that's the final threshold. That's what separates the real ones from the rest. For devotion without recognition, power without possession, mission without audience. When you say yes to that, when you live that, you don't just walk in your shadow crown. You become the architecture of a new world. And that's where this video ends and your life begins. Not the life you were programmed into. Not the life the spiritual world offered you, but the life that was coded into your bones before you ever took your first breath. The life where you no longer ask for signs because you are the signal. The life where you no longer seek the sacred because you are the sacred. The life where you no longer try to escape the world because the world begins to bend itself around your vibration. So what now? Now you walk, not to be seen, not to be followed, but because you are the path. You are the paradox. You are the light-bearing shadow. You are the storm and the stillness. You are the silence that speaks. In the mirror that cracks. The code that activates. The flame that does not flicker. You are a real dark chosen one. And the world is already shifting because you're finally ready to walk as you were born to.